So, the story begins with a boy named Homer. Homer grew up in a small, remote coal mining town. For most people there, working in the coal mine was considered their destiny. Anyone who dreamed of a life unrelated to the mines had to face social criticism. But Homer did not want to spend his entire life in the mine like his father. His dream was to leave the town one day, but that was not easy. To get into college, excelling in sports was essential, but Homer did not have the athletic ability his brother had. He could not even make it onto the school football team. His father advised him to join him in the mines after graduation. Hearing this left Homer deeply disappointed, but he had no other option, as his grades were poor. One night, when the world's first satellite appeared in the sky, the entire town gathered to watch it. Even after the crowd dispersed, Homer stood still, staring at the sky. At that very moment, a dream was born in his heart: to build rockets. When he shared this idea with his family, his brother mocked him, but his mother comforted him. The next day, Homer prepared a small cylinder filled with gunpowder and set it on fire. Hearing the explosion, his mother panicked and rushed outside. When she saw that the fence had been damaged, she became furious. Homer realized that he needed to gain proper knowledge about rockets. He tried to find books on rocketry in the library, but in a coal-dominated town, such books were nearly impossible to find. That's when he noticed Quentin, who was excellent in academics but lived a lonely life. Other students thought he was strange and kept their distance from him. Homer didn't care and approached him to talk about rockets. Quentin had a deep interest in rocket science and taught Homer many things. Thus, a strong friendship formed between them, and their rocket-building journey began. Homer brought his friends to his basement. The boys were divided into different groups, each with specific responsibilities. Within a few days, they built a model rocket using iron pipes and broom handles. However, welding the final nozzle became a major problem. It was the most crucial step for the rocket to fly. With no other option, Homer had to seek help from Dyson, one of his father's co-workers. Dyson said that if Homer's father found out, he would lose his job. But when Homer shared his dream with him, Dyson ignored the risk and completed the welding. The next day, the boys admired the beautifully welded rocket and were eager to launch it. Just then, the principal arrived and ordered the rocket to be destroyed, calling it extremely dangerous. At that moment, the science teacher, Miss Riley, stepped in and told the principal that they had brought it for the science fair. The principal asked no further questions. Homer became very interested in the science fair that Miss Riley had mentioned. Quentin then said that science fairs were only for rich kids and that they would never get a chance to participate or win a scholarship. His words dampened Homer's excitement about the science fair. Homer followed Miss Riley and asked whether what she had said about the scholarship was true. Miss Riley replied that it was not meant for him because it required great hard work and dedication, something she claimed he lacked. She said this intentionally to inspire Homer from within. After some time, the four friends went to test their rocket. They named it Puffin. Homer lit the fuse, and within moments, the rocket soared into the sky, carrying their dreams with it. Suddenly, the rocket changed direction and flew straight toward the coal mining site. Seeing this, Homer's friends immediately ran away, but Homer was worried that the rocket might injure someone, so he ran toward the mine. His father, filled with anger, was already waiting there. When Homer arrived, his father scolded him in front of everyone and threw Homer's rocket into the trash. Later that night at home, Homer complained to his mother about his father, saying that if his brother made a mistake, his father never got this angry. For him, the coal mine was everything. His father overheard this and said, "Of course the coal mine is important to me, but you won't understand it now because you're still a child. You'll understand later." Homer replied firmly that he would never work in a coal mine. After a brief argument, Homer went down to the basement. There, he discovered that all the rocket-building materials were gone. He stepped out into the rain and began collecting his scattered materials. The pieces lying all around felt like his shattered dreams he was struggling to gather again, because the launch of Puffin had failed. His friends had also lost faith. They believed their fate was already decided, that working in the mines was written in their destiny. As they talked, the boys began arguing among themselves. Suddenly, the sound of a car stopped their fight. They saw a young man about their age, but he had a luxury car and a girlfriend. This created a sharp sense of contrast in their hearts. Homer then set out alone, carrying his materials, in search of a new place. After walking for a while, he noticed his friends arriving near him in a truck. They got down, came up to Homer, and apologized. Together, they went in search of a new location. After traveling a few miles, they found an open field. First, they raised their flag there, and then completed the construction of their observation room and launch pad. No matter how difficult the road ahead might be, Homer was not going to give up so easily. He knew this was the only chance to change his life. Later, in the chemistry lab, Quentin and Homer developed a new fuel for the rocket. Although they had invented a new fuel, when they launched the rocket again, it once more changed direction and headed toward a man who had come to watch the test. The man jumped aside just in time and saved himself. Seeing this, Homer ran to the man to apologize, but surprisingly, the man was not angry at all. He explained that he had once been a pilot, and when the rocket flew, it reminded him of the days when he used to soar through the air. Drawing on his years of experience, he sensed that something was wrong with the lower part of the rocket and suggested using high-temperature resistant steel. However, money was a major problem. They had no option other than using abandoned railway tracks. Together, they managed to remove a section of the rail, but suddenly they heard the sound of a train. In panic, they quickly put the rail back in place and ran toward the train, trying to stop it. The train did not stop, but fortunately, it moved onto another track. With the new materials, Homer returned to Dyson for welding help, but by then, Dyson had disappeared. From his co-workers, Homer learned that his father had gotten Dyson fired from the company. With no other option, Homer had to learn welding himself. Meanwhile, the rest of the team prepared for the next test flight, but it turned out to be even worse than the previous one. The rockets that once flew were now only able to rise a short distance into the air, and some even exploded on the spot. Without stopping, they returned to the railway tracks to gather more material, but every experiment ended in an explosion. After analyzing many failures, Quentin concluded that the explosions were being caused by air bubbles in the fuel chamber. After some research, they improved their fuel and developed a sticky, more stable compound. Everything was finally set, and this time they were ready to launch with confidence. Miss Riley accompanied them for support, but when they reached the base, they saw that the launch site was crowded. They soon realized that many of the people present had been invited by Homer's brother to mock them. The pressure intensified. If they failed again, they would become the laughingstock of the town. Miss Riley reassured Homer, telling him that he didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She said his courage was far greater than theirs. With anxiety in his heart, Homer switched on the ignition, while the rest of the group quickly returned to the observation room. Once everything was ready, Homer pulled the trigger, and everyone present watched the rocket launch. To their amazement, the rocket neither changed direction nor exploded. Instead, it flew straight into the sky. All their day and night hard work finally paid off, and even those who had been mocking them praised them wholeheartedly. Miss Riley felt extremely proud of them, but Homer's efforts were still not acknowledged by his father. That day was Homer's birthday, and Miss Riley gifted him a book on rocket science. When Homer returned home, he felt like a stranger there, as his brother had received a football scholarship. After congratulating his brother, Homer locked himself in his room to escape the dullness around him. A few days later, Homer invited his father to watch a rocket launch, but his father refused, citing work. With everyone's eyes on him, Homer pulled the ignition switch. The rocket launched, more advanced than ever before, cutting through the sky and reaching new heights, leaving his mother and the onlookers in awe. The successful launch attracted media attention, landing them on the front page of the newspaper and making them the talk of the school. Suddenly, the principal arrived with the police. As soon as Miss Riley heard the news, she rushed to the office, but she found that Homer and the others were already in handcuffs. The police had discovered a rocket in the forest and concluded that they were responsible for the fire that had occurred the previous week. When questioned, Homer and the boys had no explanation, because one of their rockets had gone missing after the launch. As a result, they were arrested in front of the entire school. Later, Homer's father arranged bail for them. That night, an accident occurred in the mine. Homer ran toward the mine, and when he arrived, he saw that Dyson, the welder who had helped him, had lost his life, and his father was lying on a stretcher. A worker told Homer that if his father had not been there, many more people would have died that night. Staring at the entrance of the mine, Homer felt an even deeper hatred for that pit. Although his father's life was not in danger, he could not work in the mine for the time being. Someone had to take his place. Otherwise, his father would lose his job and their home as well. Homer's brother offered to work in the mine instead of their father, but that would mean giving up his sports scholarship and his chance to go to college. To protect his brother's dream, Homer decided to work in the mine himself. It seemed that becoming a miner, the life his father had wanted for him, was now unavoidable. Later, Homer and his friends went back to the base where the dream had begun. He set fire to the observation room and the launch pad, and in an instant, all their day and night hard work turned to smoke. After that, Homer went to school to withdraw his name from the science fair. Seeing this, Miss Riley became even more disappointed. Homer then went down into the mine with his fellow workers. While everyone else walked with their heads lowered out of habit, Homer was the only one looking up at the stars. The satellite that had awakened his dreams was still shining in the sky. As the elevator descended, the distance between him and the stars kept growing. And as the workers bent down to begin their labor, Homer's heart grew colder. At last, he understood how hard it had been for his father. Sometimes, his friends came to visit him in the mine. They believed that he had given up on his dream long ago, but none of them could see the sadness he carried inside. Homer's father eventually recovered and returned home. He thanked Homer for the sacrifices he had made for the family and wanted him to go back to school, but Homer refused. His father returned to the mine, and everyone praised Homer's work in front of him, saying that he had a natural talent for coal mining. However, they were unaware of how deeply unhappy Homer was inside. One day, when he returned home from work, his mother shared heartbreaking news. Miss Riley was seriously ill and had very little time left to live. Homer rode his bicycle to visit her and saw how optimistic she was despite her condition. She expressed concern for Homer's future and guided him, advising him not to blindly follow others' opinions but to trust his own instincts. She encouraged him not to get trapped by others' expectations, because he had a greater purpose. She wanted him to know that no matter what choices he made, she would always be proud of him. In reality, Homer was already feeling uncertain about the decisions he faced in life. When he returned home, his teacher's words felt like a ray of hope. That night, he couldn't sleep. He reread the rocketry book his teacher had gifted him, and a continuous stream of thoughts filled his mind. He calculated altitude and range, researching and analyzing for several days until he finally determined the rocket's probable landing direction. Homer went to Quentin for help and entered the bedroom where Quentin was studying late into the night. Seeing Homer's calculations, Quentin was astonished. After a full night of collaborative calculations, they figured out where the rocket had landed. The next morning, the two of them went to the test base and, carefully measuring distances, walked from the grassy field into the forest. By noon, they found the rocket's remains in a stream. They brought the rocket back to school, where Homer demonstrated his mathematical skills to the principal. Once seen as a low achiever, he was now using mathematics to determine the rocket's trajectory, leaving the students amazed. When they later reached the police station, they learned that the actual cause of the fire had been an aviation flare. The truth came out, and the principal admitted that he had misunderstood the boys. After leaving the station, he instructed Homer to return to school and even recommended them as the school's representatives for the science fair. Homer and his friends returned to the basement to prepare for the science exhibition, but Homer's father arrived with a serious expression and told the boys to go home. He then asked Homer to return to the mine. However, Homer's resolve was firm. At that moment, his father realized that the life he had planned for his son was difficult for him to accept. Seeing this, his father said nothing more and quietly left the room. The science fair began as planned, and they were declared champions, chosen to represent the school at the National Science and Technology Competition. By this time, they had become the pride of the town. Then the principal informed them that due to limited school funds, only one of the four could go to the competition. Without hesitation, the boys chose Homer. The next day, his friends saw Homer off on the bus to the science fair. The exhibition brought together the best minds from the country's scientific community. When Homer demonstrated his rocket, it drew a large crowd. He shared details about his innovative nozzle technology and explained in depth how the rocket worked. Some competitors even predicted that his rocket might win the championship. However, when he reached his booth the next day, he was shocked to find that all the entries were missing. He asked his friends for help, but to rebuild the model they needed access to machines in the mine. Unfortunately, due to an ongoing strike, that wasn't possible. Eventually, his mother learned about the situation and, for the sake of her son's dream, bravely made her way through the crowd of protesters to the mine. She asked her husband to help Homer and even threatened divorce if he refused. In the end, his father softened and took responsibility for resolving the strike. The workers returned to their jobs and worked through the night to build a new model for Homer. Later, his mother called him to say that the model was ready and had been sent by courier. As Homer hung up the phone, he felt immense joy. For anyone facing challenges, the support and acceptance of family becomes the greatest source of strength. The next day, Homer patiently explained his ideas and discoveries to the judges. When the judges announced his name at the award ceremony, Homer was in a state of shock and disbelief. It wasn't until his name was called a second time that he realized it wasn't a dream. He had truly won the competition. All the efforts he had made turned into cheers and applause that echoed throughout the hall. Prestigious schools reached out to him to discuss scholarships. Witnessing all this at once, Homer felt as if his mind had gone numb. When Homer returned to his town, filled with pride, he was welcomed with the same cheers and applause. His mother hugged him tightly. When he asked about his father, he was told that his father had not arrived yet. Homer was not overly worried, but when he asked about Miss Riley, he learned that her condition had worsened and that she was in the hospital. He immediately rushed there. Despite the pain and suffering, Miss Riley smiled and congratulated him. Seeing the medal in Homer's hand, she said, "I will proudly tell all my students that I taught you." Homer remained silent, holding back the tears in his eyes. On his way back, he found his father at work and invited him to watch the rocket launch scheduled for that afternoon. But his father again refused, citing work as the reason. Homer returned. Though he and his father often disagreed, they both had deep faith in each other. In Homer's heart, his father was always a hero. And in the coal mining town where he lived, there was no difference between coal mining and rocket building. Both were quests for a dream. This was their final rocket launch, named in honor of Miss Riley as a tribute to her. The crowd was many times larger than usual. Homer took out his medal and expressed his gratitude to everyone who had supported him, even thanking Miss Riley, who could not be there. Just then, his father appeared in the crowd. Homer went to him and invited him to launch the rocket. His father nodded shyly. As the crowd began the countdown, his father pressed the launch button, and the rocket soared into the sky, carrying dreams and hopes with it. Everyone looked up at the October sky. This was their future. Filled with mixed emotions, the father looked at his son with immense pride and finally understood the depth of his son's determination. In that decisive moment, as his hand gently rested on Homer's shoulder, the long-standing distance between father and son disappeared. And this is where the story ends. This is a true story. Years later, Homer became an engineer at NASA, and the rockets he designed flew into space. He was born ordinary, but he was never average. The path to his dream was filled with thorns, but sometimes a single dream is enough to light up the sky. And our story ends here. Thanks for watching.